Chapter 38, The House is in the House, Carter. It was a fight to the death, and I felt great. Every move was perfect, every strike was so much fun I wanted to laugh out loud. Set grew in size until he was larger than me, and his iron staff the size of a boat's mast. His face would flicker, sometimes human, sometimes the feral maw of the Set animal. We clashed, sword against staff, and sparks flew. He pushed me off balance, and I smashed into one of his animal statues, which toppled to the floor and broke. I regained my balance and charged, my blade biting into a chink of Set's shoulder guard. He howled as black blood seeped from the wound. He swung his staff, and I rolled before the strike could split my head. His staff cracked the floor instead. We fought back and forth, smashing pillars and walls with chunks of the ceiling falling around us, until I realized Sadie was yelling to get my attention. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her trying to shield Zia and Amos from the destruction. She'd drawn a hasty protective circle on the floor, and her shields were deflecting the falling debris, but I understood why she was worried. Much more of this and the entire throne room would collapse, crushing all of us. I doubted it would hurt Set much. He was probably counting on that. He wanted to entomb us here. I had to get him into the open. Maybe if I gave Sadie time, she could free Dad's coffin from the throne. Then I remembered how Boss had described her fight with Apophis, grappling with the enemy for eternity. Yes, Horus agreed. I raised my fist and channeled a burst of energy toward the air vent above us, blasting it open until red light once again poured through. Then I dropped my sword and launched myself at Set. I grabbed his shoulders with my bare hands, trying to get him in a wrestler's hold. He attempted to pummel me, but his staff was useless at close range. He growled and dropped the weapon, then grabbed my arms. He was much stronger than I was, but Horus knew some good moves. I twisted and got behind Set, the forearm slipping under his arm and grabbing his neck in a vice. We stumbled forward, almost stepping on Sadie's protective shields. Now we've got him, I thought. What do we do with him? Ironically, it was Amos who gave me the answer. I remembered how he turned into the storm, overcoming my sense of self and sheer mental force. Our minds had had a brief battle, but he had opposed his will with absolute confidence, imagining me as a storm cloud, and that's what I'd become. You're a fruit bat, I told Set. No, my mind yelled, but I had surprised him. I could feel his confusion, and I used it against him. It was easy to imagine him as a bat since I'd seen Amos become one when he was possessed by Set. I pictured my enemy shrinking, growing leathery wings and an even uglier face. I shrank too until I was a falcon with a fruit bat in my claws. No time to waste. I shot toward the air vent, wrestling with the bat as we spun in circles up the shaft, slashing and biting. Finally, we burst into the open, reverting to our warrior forms on the side of the red pyramid. I stood uneasily on the slope. My avatar shimmered with damage along with the right arm, and my own arm was cut and bleeding in the same spot. Set rose, wiping black blood from his mouth. He grinned at me, and his face flickered with the snarl of a predator. You can die knowing you made a good effort, Horus, but it's much too late. Look. I gazed out over the cavern, and my heart crawled into my throat. The army of demons had engaged a new enemy in the battle. Magicians, dozens of them, had appeared in a loose circle around the pyramid and were fighting their way forward. The House of Life must have gathered all of its available forces, but they were pathetically few against Set's legions. Each magician stood inside a moving protective circle, like a spotlight beam, wading through the enemy with staff and wand glowing. Flames, lightning, and tornadoes ripped through the demon host. I spotted all kinds of summoned beasts, lions, serpents, sphinxes, and even some hippos charging through the enemy like tanks. Here and there, hieroglyphs glowed in the air, causing explosions and earthquakes that destroyed Set's forces. But more demons just kept coming, surrounding the magicians in deeper and deeper ranks. I watched as one magician was completely overwhelmed, his circle broken in a flash of green light, and he went down under the enemy's wave. This is the end of the house, Set said with satisfaction. They cannot prevail as long as my pyramid stands. The magicians seemed to know this. As they got closer, they sent fiery comets and bolts of lightning toward the pyramid, but each blast dissipated harmlessly against its stone slopes, consumed in the red haze of Set's power. Then I spotted the golden capstone. 4 snake-headed giants had retrieved it and were carrying it slowly but steadily through the melee. Set's lieutenant, Face of Horror, shouted orders to them, lashing them with a whip to keep them moving. They pressed forward until they reached the pyramid's base and began to climb. I charged toward them, but Set intervened in an instant, placing himself in my path. I don't think so, Horus, he laughed. You won't ruin this party. We both summoned our weapons in our hands and fought with renewed ferocity. Slicing and dodging, I brought my sword down in a deadly arc, but Set ducked aside and my blade hit stone, sending a shockwave through my whole body. Before I could recover, Set spoke a word. Ha-we. Strike. The hieroglyphs exploded in my face and sent me tumbling down the side of the pyramid. When my vision cleared, I saw a face of horror and snake-headed giants far above me, lugging that golden load up the side of the monument, only a few steps from the top. "No," I muttered. I tried to rise, but my avatar form was sluggish. Then out of nowhere, a magician catapulted into the midst of the demons and unleashed a gale of wind. Demons went flying, dropping the capstone, and the magician struck it with his staff, stopping it from sliding. The magician was Desjardins. His forked beard and robes and leopard skin cape were singed with fire, and his eyes were full of rage. He pressed his staff against the capstone, and its golden shape began to glow, but before Desjardins could destroy it, Set rose up behind him and swung his iron rod like a baseball bat. Desjardins tumbled, broken and unconscious, all the way down the pyramid, disappearing into the mob of demons. My heart twisted. I'd never liked Desjardins, but no one deserved a fate like that. "Annoying," Set said, "but not effective. This is what the House of Life has reduced itself to, eh, Horus?" I charged up the slope, and again our weapons clanged together. We fought back and forth as gray light began to seep through the cracks in the mountain above us. Horus's keen senses told me that we had about 2 minutes until sunrise, maybe less. Horus's energy kept surging through me. My avatar was only mildly damaged, my attacks still swift and strong, but it wasn't enough to defeat Set, and Set knew it. He was in no hurry. With every minute, another magician went down on the battlefield, and chaos got closer to winning. "Patience," Horus urged. "We fought him for 7 years the first time." But I knew we didn't have 7 minutes, much less 7 years. I wish Sadie were here, but I could only hope she'd manage to set Dad free and keep Zia and Amos safe. The thought distracted me. Set swept his staff at my feet, and instead of jumping, I tried to back up. The blow cracked against my right ankle, knocking me off balance and sending me somersaulting down the pyramid side. Set laughed. "Have a nice trip." Then he picked up the capstone. I rose groaning, but my feet were like lead. I staggered up the slope, but before I'd closed even half the distance, Set placed the capstone and completed the structure. Red light flowed down the sides of the pyramid with a sound like the world's largest bass guitar, shaking the entire mountain and making my whole body go numb. 30 seconds to sunrise," Set yelled with glee, "and this land will forever be mine. You can't stop me alone, Horus, especially not in the desert, the source of my strength." "You're right," said a nearby voice. I glanced over and saw Sadie rising from the air vent, radiant with multicolored light, her staff and wand glowing. "Except Horus is not alone," she said, "and we're not going to fight you in the desert." She struck her staff against the pyramid and shouted a name, the last words I'd ever expected to utter as a battle cry.